I, Adrian Blackthorn, future Alpha King of the Northern Territories, reject you, Isolde Thorn, as my mate and future Luna Queen." The words echoed through the ceremonial hall, like thunder splitting the sky, and Isolde felt her knees buckle beneath her. She had prepared herself for many things tonight. She had steeled her heart against disappointment, had practiced her invisible smile for when he would inevitably choose Seraphine, had even rehearsed the graceful way she would fade back into the EO. Shadows where she belonged. But she had not prepared for this. She had not prepared for the mate bond to snap into place just moments before, that golden thread of destiny pulling tight between her soul and his, so intense it had stolen the breath from her lungs. She had not prepared for him to feel it too. She had seen it in his eyes, that flash of recognition, that moment of pure shock when their gazes locked across the crowded hall. And she certainly had not prepared for him to stand before 300 alphas, betas, and pack leaders from across the continent, and reject her with such cold finality, as if she were nothing more than a mistake that needed correcting. The silence that followed was deafening. Isolde stood frozen in the center of the sacred circle, the moonlight streaming through the glass ceiling above, illuminating her like some cruel spotlight designed specifically to showcase her humiliation. Every eye in the hall was on her, every face a mixture of pity, disgust, or barely concealed satisfaction. Seraphine stood beside Adrian on the raised platform, her perfect features arranged in an expression of sympathetic concern that did not quite reach her cold blue eyes, her hand already possessively wrapped around his arm. Isolde could smell the wolfsbane and lavender perfume that Seraphine always wore, cloying and suffocating even from this distance. She could smell the expensive wine that had been served earlier, the sweat and musk of hundreds of powerful shifters packed into one room, the beeswax candles burning in their silver holders. But most of all, she could smell him. Cedar and winter rain, smoke and something wild that made her wolf, the wolf she had never been able to shift into, the wolf she had been told her entire life was too weak to emerge, suddenly stirred deep inside her chest like something waking from a long sleep. "Adrian, perhaps we should," someone started to say, an older alpha with silver streaking through his dark hair, but Adrian cut him off with a sharp gesture. "The decision is made, Alpha Dimitri. Isolde Thorn has no wolf. She has no pack standing. She cannot even shift during a full moon. How could she possibly stand beside me as I unite the territories? How could she command respect from the packs when she herself is barely more than human?" His voice was steady, reasonable even, as if he were discussing a minor business transaction rather than destroying the one person fate had chosen for him. Isolde felt something inside her crack. Not her heart, that had been breaking slowly for years as she watched him from afar, but something deeper, something fundamental. "I understand, Alpha." Her own voice surprised her with its steadiness. She had expected it to shake, to break, to betray the absolute devastation currently tearing through her chest like claws. Instead, it came out clear and cold, and she saw something flicker across Adrian's face. Regret, perhaps. Or maybe just relief that she was not going to make a scene. "Then, I accept your rejection." The formal words tasted like ash on her tongue. She had been taught the protocols, of course. Every wolf knew them, even the weak ones, even the ones who would never need them because they would never be lucky enough, or unlucky enough, to find their mate. When a rejection was issued, it had to be accepted, or the bond would linger, poisoning both parties until someone went mad or died, or both. I, Isolde Thorn, accept the rejection of Adrian Blackthorn. The moment the words left her lips, pain exploded through her body. It felt like someone had reached into her chest and wrapped their fist around her heart, squeezing until she could not breathe, could not think, could only feel. The golden thread that had connected them for those few precious minutes began to fray, to dissolve, to burn away like paper in a flame. She gasped, her hand flying to her chest, and she saw Adrian stagger slightly on the platform, his jaw clenching, his hand gripping the podium until his knuckles turned white. Good, she thought viciously. Good. Let him feel even a fraction of this agony. Let him understand what he has done. But she did not let herself fall. She did not let herself scream or beg or demand to know why destiny would be so cruel as to give her this gift only to snatch it away before she could even fully comprehend what it meant. Instead, Isolde straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and looked Adrian Blackthorne directly in. His storm-gray eyes. She wanted him to see her. Really see her. Not the invisible Omega who cleaned the pack house. Not the girl without a wolf who was barely tolerated on the edges of pack life. But her, Isolde. The woman who had just had her soul torn in half for the sake of his political ambitions. I hope she makes you happy, Alpha King. She said the title with just enough emphasis to make it clear what she thought of it. Then she turned, her simple gray dress, the only formal thing she so owned, swirling around her legs, and began to walk toward the massive doors at the end of the hall. Every step felt like wading through water, her body screaming at her to stop, to go back, to fight for what was hers by right of the moon goddess herself. But Isolde had been invisible her whole life. She knew how to disappear. She knew how to endure. And more than anything, she knew that staying here, in this pack, in this life, would destroy whatever fragile pieces of herself she still had left. Let her go, she heard Adrian say behind her, his voice rough with something that might have been pain if she had any generosity left to give him. Seraphine and I will complete the Luna Queen ceremony tomorrow at dawn. The doors opened before Isolde reached them, 2 guards pulling them wide, their faces carefully blank. Professional. They had been trained not to react to pack drama, no matter how spectacular. Isolde walked through without looking back, even though every instinct she had was screaming at her to turn around, to see his face one more time, to memorize the man who had been meant for her and had chosen duty over destiny. The night air hit her like a slap, cold and clean after the suffocating atmosphere of the ceremonial hall. The Shadow Moon Pack territory spread out before her, the main pack house behind her still blazing with light and music as the celebration continued. Because of course it would continue. One rejected Omega meant nothing in the grand scheme of Adrian Blackthorne's coronation. The mating ceremony would proceed. The alliances would be solidified. The Northern Territories would have their Alpha King and their perfect, powerful Luna Queen. And Isolde would be forgotten by morning. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. She made it to the edge of the forest before the sobs finally broke free, tearing out of her throat in gasping, painful heaves that bent her double. She pressed her hand against a tree trunk, the rough bark biting into her palm, grounding her, keeping her from simply collapsing onto the ground and never getting up again. How long had she loved him? Years. Since she was 16 and had first seen him at a pack gathering, tall and commanding even then, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he laughed at something his beta had said. She had known, even without the mate bond, even without any logical reason, that he was special, that he was hers somehow, in some way she could not explain. She had watched him grow into his power, had seen him train the younger wolves, had observed from her invisible corner as he made decisions that showed both strength and compassion. She had convinced herself that if he could just see her, really see her, he would understand that she was more than her lack of a wolf, that she had value beyond her ability to shift and fight. But he had seen her tonight. The mate bond had forced him to see her, and he had looked at her and found her wanting. Pathetic. The word came from behind her, and Isolde spun, her heart racing. Seraphine stood at the tree line, still in her ceremonial gown of deep crimson silk that probably cost more than everything Isolde had ever owned combined. Her blonde hair was perfectly arranged in an intricate updo, her makeup flawless, her posture that of someone who had never doubted her place in the world for even a single moment. "Excuse me," Isolde managed, her voice still thick with tears. "I said you are pathetic." Seraphine moved closer, her heels somehow silent on the forest floor, despite the branches and leaves. "Did you actually think he would choose you? You, a wolfless nobody with no family, no connections, no power? The mate bond means nothing compared to what I can offer him. Armies, alliances, strength. You would have been a liability, a weakness for his enemies to exploit. He made the right choice, even if it took him a moment. To see it clearly." Her smile was sharp as broken glass. "And you made it so easy for him by accepting the rejection immediately. Thank you for that, truly. It saved us all a great deal of awkwardness." Isolde wanted to respond with something cutting, something strong, something that would wipe that smug expression off Seraphine's perfect face. But the truth was, she had nothing left. No words, no fight, no will to engage with this woman who had everything Isolde would never have. "Why did you follow me out here?" Isolde asked instead, her exhaustion evident in every syllable. "Just to gloat? You won, Seraphine. Congratulations. I hope you enjoy your crown." She turned to walk deeper into the forest, but Seraphine's next words stopped her cold. "I followed you to make sure you understand something very clearly. You are to leave Shadow Moon territory by dawn. You are no longer welcome here. In fact, I have already spoken to Alpha Dimitri and several other regional alphas. They have agreed that for the stability of Adrian's new reign, it would be best if you simply disappeared. No pack will take you in. No territory will shelter you. You are alone now, Isolde. Completely and utterly alone." The casual cruelty in her tone was somehow worse than if she had been screaming. This was not anger or passion. This was calculated destruction. "You cannot do that. I was born in this pack." Isolde heard the desperation creeping into her voice and hated herself for it. "I have nowhere else to go." Seraphine laughed, the sound like wind chimes made of ice. "That is not my problem. Perhaps you should have thought about that before fate made the mistake of marking you as Adrian's mate. But do not worry. I am certain the human cities will welcome you. After all, that is what you are, essentially. A human pretending to be a wolf. At least there you will not have to keep up the charade." She turned, her dress swirling dramatically, and began walking back toward the lights and music of the pack house. "Dawn, Isolde. If you are still here when the sun rises, I will have the border patrols remove you by force, and they will not be gentle." Then she was gone, leaving Isolde alone in the darkness with nothing but the sound of her own ragged breathing and the hollow ache where her mate bond had been. For a long moment, Isolde stood completely still, her mind blank with shock and grief, and a bone-deep weariness that made her want to simply lie down in the leaves and let the forest take her. But somewhere deep inside, beneath all the pain and humiliation, something stirred. That same something that had woken when Adrian spoke the rejection. That presence she had always felt, but never been able to touch. That whisper in her mind that had kept her going through years of being overlooked and underestimated. "No," she whispered into the darkness. "No, I will not let them do this to me." She did not know where the words came from, but once she said them, felt right, they felt true. "If I have to leave, then I will leave, but I will not go to the human cities. I will not fade away like they want me to. I will find out why I have no wolf. I will find out who I really am, and I will come back so powerful that they will regret ever making me feel small." The promise hung in the air, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long and mournful, as if the moon itself had heard her vow. Isolde had heard the stories of the Forbidden Peaks her entire life. Every wolf pup in the Northern Territories grew up with the warnings. Do not go into the mountains. Do not venture past the sacred markers. Do not seek the old magic that sleeps in those ancient stones, because it will consume you, change you, destroy everything you thought you knew. The tales spoke of wolves who had gone mad from desperation or grief and climbed into those mist-shrouded heights, never to return. They spoke of ancient beings that predated the packs, entities that had their own laws, their own prices, their own definitions of mercy and justice. They spoke of the moon-blessed bloodline, the original royal family who had ruled all wolves with wisdom and power until they had been betrayed, murdered in a single blood-soaked night 3 generations ago. Their territory had been divided among the surviving alphas. Their name had been struck from pack records, and their descendants, if any survived, had been hunted to extinction. Or so the official histories claimed. But Isolde had always wondered. Late at night, when she could not sleep because the other Omegas were whispering cruel things they thought she could not hear, she would think about those stories. She would think about power that came from the moon itself, rather than from physical strength. She would think about magic and destiny, and the possibility that there was more to being a wolf than just the ability to shift and fight. Now, as she stood at the base of the mountain path, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small pack of supplies she had managed to grab from her room in the pack house, those stories did not seem frightening. They seemed like hope. The moon was full overhead, so bright it cast sharp shadows across the rocks and sparse trees that marked the beginning of the Forbidden Peaks territory. Isolde took a deep breath, tasting snow and pine and something else, something that made her skin prickle with awareness. Then she started climbing. The path was barely visible, overgrown with thorny bushes and loose with scattered stones that made every step treacherous. Her legs burned within minutes, her lungs aching from the thin mountain air. She was not a warrior, had never trained beyond the basic self-defense required of all pack members. Her body was soft where Seraphine's was hard, untested where Adrian's was battle-scarred. But she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, because the alternative was going back, and that was no longer an option. Hours passed. The lights of the Shadow Moon territory disappeared behind her, swallowed by the forest and distance. The temperature dropped until her breath came out in visible clouds, and her fingers went numb despite the jacket she had thrown on before leaving. Still she climbed. "You are far from home, little wolf." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the rocks, carried on the wind. Isolde spun, her heart hammering, searching the darkness for the source. Nothing. Just shadows and moonlight, and the distant sound of water running over stones. "I am not a little wolf," Isolde said, proud that her voice did not shake. "And I have no home. Not anymore." Laughter, low and amused. "Interesting. Most who come here are running from something. You sound like you are running toward something instead. Tell me, child, what do you seek in the Forbidden Peaks?" There was a shimmer in the air in front of her, like heat rising from summer pavement. And then a figure materialized. An old woman, her hair the silver white of new snow, her eyes the same luminous shade as the full moon above. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from mist and starlight, and when she moved, Isolde could not quite track her, as if she was slightly out of sync with the rest of the world. "I seek the truth." Isolde forced herself to meet those unsettling eyes. "I seek to know why I have no wolf when I was born to a pack. I seek to understand why the mate bond chose me if I'm as weak and worthless as everyone believes. I seek," she paused, then finished fiercely. "I seek to become something more than the invisible Omega who was rejected by an Alpha King because political alliances matter more than destiny." The old woman studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then she smiled, and it was not entirely kind. "You seek revenge." It was not a question. "No," Isolde said, then reconsidered. "Maybe. I do not know. I just know I cannot be that helpless, powerless version of myself anymore. If I am going to survive, I need to change. I need to be stronger. The old woman nodded slowly. Strength comes in many forms, child. The strength to destroy, the strength to endure, the strength to forgive. Which do you truly seek? The question felt like a trap, but Isolde answered honestly. All of them, any of them. Whatever it takes to ensure no one can ever make me feel this small again. Then you have come to the right place. The old woman gestured up the mountain path. But I warn you, what you seek is not a gift. It is a birthright you have been denied, and reclaiming it will cost you. The wolf inside you sleeps not because you are weak, but because you are powerful beyond measure. Your bloodline was hunted because they feared what you could become. If you wake that power, you will never be able to go back to being invisible. You will draw attention, enemies, those who will want to use you or destroy you. Are you prepared for that? Isolde thought of Adrian's face when he rejected her. She thought of Seraphine's cruel laughter. She thought of every person in that ceremonial hall who had looked at her with pity or disgust. Yes, she said without hesitation. I am prepared. The old woman's smile widened. No, child, you are not. But you will be. She reached out and pressed her palm flat against Isolde's chest, right over her heart, and the world exploded into light and pain. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Isolde screamed, but the sound was torn away by a rushing wind that came from inside her, from some place she had never known existed. Images flooded her mind, too fast to fully process. A great hall filled with wolves whose eyes glowed silver like the old woman's, a crown made of moonstone and bone, a man with her father's face, but younger, stronger, wearing the regalia of a king, a woman with her mother's smile, but fiercer, more alive, her hands crackling, with power that looked like captured starlight, battles, betrayal, blood pooling on marble floors, children running through secret passages, a baby being hidden, wrapped in enchantments so powerful they would burn away her wolf to keep her safe, make her invisible, make her seem like nothing so that she would be overlooked by those who hunted her bloodline to extinction. You are not Isolde Thorn, daughter of no one. The old woman's voice cut through the chaos. You are Isolde Moonwhisper, last surviving heir of the Moon-Blessed dynasty. Your grandfather was High King of all wolves before the Great Betrayal. Your father was Prince Kieran, who died protecting your mother as she fled with you in her arms. Your wolf sleeps because your mother bound her with her dying breath, sealing away your power until you were strong enough to survive its awakening. And that time is now. The pain intensified, moving from her chest down through her limbs, into her bones, changing something fundamental at the cellular level. Isolde felt her wolf rising, not slowly, not gently, but like a tidal wave that had been held back by a dam that was finally, catastrophically, breaking. She fell to her knees, her hands sinking into the rocky ground, and she felt her wolf, truly felt her for the first time, ancient and furious and absolutely magnificent. Let her out, the old woman commanded. Let her show you what you really are. And Isolde did. The shift, when it came, was nothing like the stories described. There was no smooth transition, no practiced ease. Instead, it was violent and transformative, and absolutely inevitable. Her bones cracked and reformed. Her muscles tore and regrew. Her senses expanded until she could hear the heartbeat of every living thing within a mile radius. Her clothes shredded, falling away as fur, thick and silvery white, erupted across her skin. When it was over, when the agony finally faded into a strange, wild euphoria, Isolde stood on 4 legs, instead of 2, and looked at the world through eyes that glowed with their own internal light. She was massive, she realized dimly. larger than any she-wolf she had ever seen. Her paws left deep impressions in the rock. Her fur seemed to capture and reflect the moonlight, making her look like she was carved from living silver. And the power. Oh, the power that thrummed through her veins was intoxicating. She could feel the moon above, not just see it, but feel it like a living presence that recognized her, welcomed her, fed her strength. "Beautiful," the old woman said, and there was genuine admiration in her voice. "Your grandmother would be so proud. You are everything the moon blessed were meant to be. Strength and grace and magic woven together. But now comes the difficult part. Now you must learn to control this power. Now you must decide what you will do with it. And now," her expression turned serious, "you must understand what your very existence means for the delicate, political balance your former mate has just established." She waved her hand, and Isolde felt herself shift back to human form. Easier this time, almost instinctive. She stood naked in the moonlight, but somehow that felt appropriate, felt right, as if she had been reborn into something new. The old woman produced a robe from thin air and draped it over Isolde's shoulders. There are those who know what the moon-blessed mark looks like. Your eyes will glow silver when you use your power. Your wolf form is unmistakable. The moment you appear before the packs, they will know what you are. Some will want to follow you, believing you are the rightful High Queen. Others will want to kill you to prevent another moon blessed from rising to power. And Adrian, she paused significantly, Adrian will have to choose between the mate he rejected and the political stability he sacrificed you to achieve. Because the ancient laws are clear. A moon. Blessed can challenge for the throne, and if you invoke the old rites, he will not be able to refuse you. Isolde wrapped the robe tighter around herself, her mind racing. She had come here seeking answers, seeking power enough to survive on her own. She had not expected this. Had not expected to discover she was not just abandoned, but hidden. Not just powerless, but purposely suppressed. Not just rejected by an alpha king, but denied her birthright as a queen. "What if I do not want the throne?" she asked quietly. "What if I just want to be left alone?" The old woman laughed, and this time it was not unkind. "Then you are more like your grandmother than I thought. She never wanted to rule either. But sometimes, child, what we want matters less than what is necessary. Your people, the wolves who still remember the moon-blessed reign, who still tell stories of justice and peace and prosperity under your family's rule, they have been waiting, praying, hoping that somehow, somewhere, an heir survived. You owe them nothing. This is true. They did not save you or your parents, but they also did not betray you. Most did not even know you existed. And now that you have awakened, now that your power has been released, you will have to decide what kind of leader you want to be. The kind who hides, or the kind who fights for what is hers. Isolde looked down at her hands, these hands that had scrubbed floors and served meals, and been invisible for so long. They looked the same, but she could feel the difference. Could feel the potential thrumming just beneath her skin. "Teach me," she said finally, looking up at the old woman with determination hardening in her chest. "Teach me everything. How to control my wolf, how to use my power, how to fight, how to lead. Teach me to be the queen my family would have wanted me to be." And then, her voice dropped, becoming something cold and certain. "Then I will go back. Not for revenge, not for the throne, but because Adrian Blackthorn needs to understand that when you reject your mate, when you choose politics over destiny, there are consequences, and I am going to be his." The old woman's smile was sharp and satisfied. "Good. Your training begins now. But I warn you, by the time you are ready to descend from this mountain, you will not be the same woman who climbed it. The Isolde who was rejected will be gone. and in her place will be something the packs have not seen in generations. A true moon, blessed in her full power. The question is, will the Northern Territories survive your return? The next 3 months passed in a blur of pain, discovery, and transformation that reshaped everything Isolde thought she knew about herself and her capabilities. The old woman, who insisted Isolde call her Elder Maren and offered no other name or title, was a ruthless teacher. She woke Isolde before dawn every morning to run through the mountain trails in wolf form, building endurance and teaching her to navigate with instincts rather than conscious thought. She pushed Isolde past exhaustion, past the point where her muscles screamed and her lungs burned and her mind begged for rest, because as she explained in that matter-of-fact tone that allowed no argument, a queen could not afford weakness. "Your enemies will not care if you are tired," Maren said one morning, as Isolde collapsed after a particularly brutal training session that had involved fighting off 3 illusory opponents simultaneously while maintaining control of the lunar magic that now flowed through her like a second heartbeat. "They will not show mercy because you are still learning. If you claim your birthright, if you challenge the current order, there will be alphas who will try to kill you. Not just defeat you, kill you. Because you represent everything they fear. Change. The old ways. The possibility that their power was never legitimate to begin with." Isolde learned to fight with tooth and claw in her wolf form, her silver fur becoming a blur as she mastered techniques that had been passed down through generations of moon-blessed warriors. She learned to channel the moon's power into physical manifestations, creating shields of hardened light, weapons of pure energy, healing magic that could knit wounds closed in seconds. She learned the old language, the words of power that could compel truth, bind oaths, break curses. She learned politics and history, studying the fall of her family's dynasty with clinical detachment, even as rage burned in her chest at the systematic way they had been betrayed by those they trusted most. "It was Alpha Dimitri's grandfather who led the coup," Maren explained one evening, as they sat by the fire in the small cave that served as their base. "He convinced several other powerful alphas that the moon-blessed had too much power, that their magic gave them an unfair advantage in maintaining control. He promised them territories and autonomy if they would help him eliminate the royal family. They struck during, the harvest moon ceremony, when your grandfather and his court were at their most vulnerable, gathered in one place for the traditional celebrations. It was a massacre." "And Adrian's family?" Isolde asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Where were the Blackthorns during all this?" Maren's expression turned complicated. Adrian's great-grandfather was the High King's most trusted general. He was away on the borders, dealing with a rogue pack threat. When he heard what had happened, he rode back with his forces, but by then it was too late. The palace was burned, the royal family was dead, and the new order had already been established. He could have challenged them, could have tried to restore the moon blessed, but instead he accepted a compromise. He was given control of the Northern Territories in exchange for his support of the new system. Many believe he was complicit, that he knew about the coup and deliberately stayed away. Others say he was manipulated, that the rogue pack threat was manufactured to keep him occupied. The truth died with him. She paused, studying Isolde's face. "Adrian carries that legacy whether he knows it or not. His crown is built on your family's graves. That is why the mate bond between you is so significant. Fate does not make mistakes. Perhaps it was trying to heal the old wound, to unite the bloodlines and restore balance. Or perhaps fate has a cruel sense of humor," Isolde said bitterly. "Giving me a mate who would rather have political power than his destined partner." Maren shook her head. "Do not mistake his choice for lack of caring. I have watched him through the moon's eye since your rejection. His wolf is suffering. The partial bond that remains after a rejection is tormenting him. He completes the ceremonies with Seraphine, performs his duties as Alpha King, but there is a hollowness to him now. He dreams of you every night." wakes reaching for a connection that is no longer there. Seraphine knows, of course. She sees the way he stares at nothing, catches him breathing deeply as if searching for your scent on the wind. It is driving her mad with jealousy, which makes her more dangerous to you than any enemy army. Isolde absorbed this information with mixed feelings. Part of her, the part that still remembered loving him from afar, felt vindicated. He was suffering as she had suffered. But another part, the part that was growing stronger and colder with each day of training, simply felt nothing. It does not matter, she said finally. Whatever we might have had, he destroyed it. I am not returning to win him back. I am returning because it is my right, because my family's legacy deserves to be remembered and honored. And because... She met Marin's eyes, her own glowing faintly silver in the firelight. Those who betrayed my grandfather need to answer for their crimes. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. By the end of the 3rd month, Isolde barely recognized herself. Her body had transformed from soft and uncertain to lean and powerful, muscles flowing beneath skin that seemed to glow with internal light when the moon was full. Her senses were sharper than any normal wolf, able to distinguish individual heartbeats in a crowd from a mile away, to track a scent 3 days old, to see in complete darkness as clearly as noon. Her control over her lunar magic had evolved from clumsy and draining to instinctive and limitless, as natural as breathing. She could shift in seconds now, her transformations smooth and painless. She could maintain partial shifts, manifesting claws or fangs or enhanced strength without fully changing forms. She could sense the emotions of those around her, read truth in the rhythms of their hearts, command obedience with nothing more than the force of her will, amplified through her royal bloodline. She was, in every sense, what the moon-blessed were meant to be, the living embodiment of the moon goddess's will on earth. "You are ready," Marin said one morning, her tone filled with something that might have been pride or might have been sadness. "There is nothing more I can teach you here. The rest of your education will come from experience, from testing yourself against real opponents with real stakes. It is time for you to decide what you want to do with the power you have reclaimed." Isolde stood at the edge of the cliff, where they had trained every day, looking out over the vast expanse of forest and territory that stretched below the forbidden peaks. Somewhere down there, beyond the morning mist, lay the Shadow Moon Pack. The pack that had overlooked her for her entire life. The pack where Adrian Blackthorn now ruled as Alpha King, with Seraphine as his Luna Queen, their reign built on alliances and compromises, and the sacrifice of the mate bond. "Tell me honestly," Isolde said, without looking at Marin. "If I challenge the current order, if I invoke the old laws, and claim my birthright, how many will die?" Marin was silent for a long moment. "Many," she said finally. "Some will support you immediately, those who still remember or whose families remember the prosperity under moon-blessed rule. But others have too much to lose. Their territories, their positions, their very identities are tied to the system that replaced your family. They will fight. And even among those who might support you philosophically, many will hesitate because you are young, untested in real battle, unknown. You will have to prove yourself through blood and victory. There is no other way. And Adrian?" Isolde's voice was barely above a whisper. "What will he do?" Marin moved to stand beside her, her ancient eyes scanning the horizon. "That is the question, is it not? Legally, he must acknowledge your claim. The old laws still exist in the founding documents, even if they have been ignored for generations. If you present yourself as the moon-blessed heir, if you can prove your lineage through the traditional trials, he will have no choice but to recognize your right to challenge for the throne. But whether he fights you or abdicates, whether he honors the mate bond that still connects you despite the rejection, whether he chooses duty or destiny this time, that I cannot predict. He is a complex man, shaped by loyalty to his family's legacy and genuine desire to do what is best for the packs. You represent a threat to everything he has built, but you are also the one person fate chose for him. That conflict will tear him apart. Good, the cold part of Isolde thought. Let him be torn apart. Let him suffer the impossible choice. But even as she thought it, she felt the faintest echo of that golden thread, that mate bond that should have been severed completely, but somehow still whispered between them across the distance. He was awake, she realized suddenly. Right now, at this exact moment, he was thinking of her. She could almost feel the weight of his attention, the ache of his longing. I am going back, Isolde said, decision crystallizing into certainty. Not to start a war, though I will finish one if necessary. Not to claim revenge, though I will demand justice. I am going back because I am Isolde Moonwhisper, daughter of Prince Kirin, granddaughter of High King Aldrich, last of the moon-blessed bloodline, and it is time the Northern Territories remembered what that means. She turned to face Maren, her eyes blazing silver with power and purpose. But I will not go as a supplicant or a petitioner. I will go as a queen, and I will give them one chance, only one, to acknowledge what was stolen from my family and make it right. If they refuse, if they choose to defend the corrupt system built on betrayal and murder, then yes, there will be blood. But it will be blood spent in service of justice, not revenge. Can you accept that distinction? Maren studied her for a long, measuring moment, then nodded slowly. Your grandmother would have said the same thing. She too believed in justice over vengeance, in mercy tempered with strength. I accept your path, Isolde Moonwhisper, and I will stand beside you when you face them, as I stood beside your family before. But know this, once you descend from this mountain, once you reveal yourself, there is no going back to safety or anonymity. You will be a symbol, a rallying point, a threat. Every moment of every day for the rest of your life will be political, dangerous, scrutinized. Are you truly ready for that burden? Isolde looked down at her hands, remembering how they had trembled the night Adrian rejected her, how small and powerless she had felt. Now they were steady, strong, capable of channeling enough power to level a building or heal a dying wolf. I have been invisible my entire life, she said softly. I think I can handle being seen. 3 days later, Isolde stood at the edge of Shadow Moon territory once more, but this time she was not the broken, rejected Omega fleeing into exile. She wore robes of deep midnight blue that Maren had woven from moonlight and shadow, embroidered with silver threads that formed the ancient symbols of her bloodline. Her hair, which had grown long during her time in the mountains, fell in waves down her back, crowned with a simple circlet of silver that had belonged to her grandmother. She carried no weapons, because she was the weapon. Her very presence radiated power, making the air around her shimmer with barely contained energy. It was the night of the full moon, the most significant night in the werewolf calendar, when all packs gathered for the traditional hunt and celebration. She had timed her return deliberately, because she needed witnesses, needed the maximum number of alphas and pack leaders present for what she was about to do. Are you certain about this? Maren asked from beside her, also dressed in formal robes that marked her as an elder, one of the ancient guardians of werewolf tradition. Once you cross this border, once you announce yourself, there is no retreat. Isolde smiled, and it was not a kind expression. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Together they walked forward, crossing the invisible line that marked Shadow Moon territory. Immediately alarms sounded, magical and physical, alerting the pack to intruders. Within minutes they were surrounded by border patrol wolves, snarling and snapping, demanding identification. Tell Alpha King Adrian Blackthorn, Isolde said, her voice carrying an edge of command that made several of the wolves flinch and lower their eyes involuntarily. That Isolde Moonwhisper, last heir of the moon-blessed dynasty, has returned to claim what is hers by right of blood and moon law. Tell him I invoke the ancient right of challenge. And tell him, she smiled, cold and dangerous, that his rejected mate is no longer the powerless Omega he dismissed. She is a queen. And she is done being invisible. The ceremonial grounds were packed with hundreds of werewolves from every major pack in the Northern Territories, all gathered in their finest clothes for the full moon celebration. The air was thick with the scents of roasted meat, spiced wine, and the musk of so many powerful shifters in one place. Conversations and laughter filled the night, the kind of easy camaraderie that came with tradition and full bellies and the promise of the hunt to follow. Adrian stood on the central platform beside Seraphine, playing his role as Alpha King with practiced ease, greeting visiting alphas, listening to petitions, settling minor disputes. He should have felt triumphant, powerful, satisfied with the empire he had built over the past 3 months, the alliances he had solidified, the respect he had earned. Instead, he felt hollow, like something essential had been carved out of his chest and left a void that nothing could fill. His wolf was a constant restless presence in his mind, pacing and whining and searching, always searching for a scent that was not there, for a connection that had been severed. "You are not paying attention," Seraphine murmured beside him, her smile fixed, but her eyes hard. "Alpha Dimitri asked you a question." Adrian forced his focus back to the elderly Alpha in front of him, the same Alpha whose grandfather had led the coup that toppled the moon-blessed dynasty. "My apologies, Alpha Dimitri. Could you repeat that?" Before Dimitri could respond, a commotion near the main entrance drew everyone's attention. The crowd parted, conversations dying mid-sentence, as 2 figures walked forward with the kind of presence that demanded acknowledgement. Adrian's wolf, which had been drowsing miserably in the back of his mind, suddenly surged to attention with a force that nearly drove him to his knees. That scent, jasmine and moonlight and something wild and primal that made his entire body tighten with need and recognition. No, it could not be. She had left. She was gone. He had checked, had sent trackers, had spent weeks confirming that she had truly disappeared from Packlands. Some part of him had hoped she found happiness elsewhere, even as a larger part had mourned her loss with an intensity that terrified him. But the woman walking toward him now was not the Isolde he remembered. This woman was power incarnate, her eyes glowing pure silver, her dark hair flowing loose and crowned with what looked like ancient royal regalia. She moved with the fluid grace of a trained warrior, every step radiating confidence and barely leashed strength. The robes she wore were marked with symbols he recognized from old texts, forbidden histories, the bloodline that should have been extinct. Impossible. Alpha Dimitri breathed beside him, his face going pale. It cannot be. We made certain. We hunted them all. Adrian barely heard him, his entire attention fixed on Isolde as she stopped at the base of the platform, looking up at him with an expression that mixed hurt, challenge, and something that might have been disappointment. "Hello, Adrian," she said, and her voice carried to every corner of the ceremonial grounds, without her needing to shout, amplified by power that made the air itself vibrate. "Did you miss me?" The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye turned to Adrian, waiting for his response, for his acknowledgement of this impossible situation. Seraphine's hand tightened on his arm, her nails digging in through the fabric of his formal jacket. "Who is this woman?" Seraphine demanded, though the tremor in her voice suggested she knew exactly who this was and was terrified. Isolde's smile was sharp as she turned her glowing eyes on Seraphine. "I am the woman your mate rejected 3 months ago because I was not powerful enough, not connected enough, not worthy enough to stand beside him. Tell me, Luna Queen does this. She gestured to herself, power crackling visibly around her. Fingers. Look powerless to you? Does the last surviving heir of the moon-blessed dynasty, granddaughter of the High King who ruled before your grandfathers betrayed and murdered him, seem unworthy? The accusations hung in the air like poison, and Adrian watched as decades of carefully maintained political stability began to crumble in real time. Pack leaders who had supported him, who had celebrated his coronation, now looked at him with suspicion. Because if what Isolde claimed was true, if she really was moon-blessed, then his entire reign was built on stolen ground. You died, Dmitri said, stepping forward, his composure cracking. Your entire family died. I was there, I saw the bodies. You cannot be who you claim. Isolde turned to him, and the look in her eyes was colder than winter. You saw bodies, yes, but not mine. My mother used her dying breath to hide me, to seal away my power so completely that not even the most skilled trackers could sense what I truly was. She made me invisible, made me seem weak and worthless, because she knew that was the only way I would survive while men like you hunted my bloodline to extinction. She took a step toward him, and the old alpha actually backed away. Tell me, Dmitri, did you ever wonder why your reign was plagued with bad luck? Why your territories barely prospered while others flourished? The moon goddess does not forgive betrayal, and you betrayed everything she stood for when you murdered my family in cold blood. Adrian finally found his voice. Isolde, I do not understand. How is this possible? How are you? He gestured helplessly at her transformed appearance. This. She turned back to him, and he saw centuries of pain and power in those silver eyes. You rejected me because I had no wolf, Adrian. Because I was weak. Because I could not stand beside you as an equal. Well, here I am. Not only do I have a wolf, I have a wolf more powerful than any you have ever seen. Not only can I stand beside you, can stand above you, because my claim to leadership of the Northern Territories supersedes yours by law, by tradition, and by blood right. Your great-grandfather was given his position by men who murdered the rightful rulers. My grandfather was the High King, chosen by the moon goddess herself. So tell me, Alpha King, she emphasized the title mockingly, which of us has the legitimate claim to the throne? The challenge was clear, unmistakable, witnessed by hundreds of pack leaders and recorded. By the pack historians who were frantically taking notes. By ancient law that still technically existed in the founding documents of Werewolf society, even if it had not been invoked in generations, Adrian had to respond. He could acknowledge her claim and step aside. He could fight her for the right to rule. Or he could reject the ancient laws entirely, which would make him a usurper in the eyes of tradition-bound wolves and potentially splinter the territories into civil war. Adrian, not do this, Seraphine whispered urgently. She is trying to manipulate you. We can have her arrested, tried for disrupting the peace, exiled permanently. Isolde laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. By all means, try. I would love to see how your border patrols handle a fully awakened moon-blessed. Spoiler alert, they cannot. I am not here because I need permission, Seraphine. I am here because tradition demands I offer the current leadership a chance to step aside peacefully before I take what is mine. She looked back at Adrian, and this time he saw the hurt beneath the power. The girl who had been rejected still buried somewhere inside this formidable woman. I loved you, you know. From the moment I first saw you, I knew you were special. And when the mate bond snapped into place, even for those few precious minutes before you destroyed it, I thought maybe fate had given me something beautiful. But you looked at me, your destined mate, and you found me lacking. So I left. I climbed the forbidden peaks, and I found the truth about who I am. And now I am back, not as the Omega you rejected, but as your queen. The question is, Are you going to make the same mistake twice? Are you going to choose political stability over what is right? Or are you finally going to show the courage your great-grandfather lacked? Adrian felt like he was drowning, his mind racing through implications and consequences, and the impossible situation before him. Isolde was right. If she truly was moon-blessed, if she could prove her lineage through the traditional trials, then by the oldest laws of their people, she outranked him. The moon-blessed had been established as the supreme authority over all packs, their power divine, their right to rule unquestionable. When they fell, the system had fragmented into the network of autonomous alphas that now existed. But the laws had never been formally changed, just ignored because everyone assumed the bloodline was extinct. If she claimed those laws now, if she demanded the throne based on her heritage, half the territories would support her on principle alone, because tradition was sacred to their kind. The other half would fight, because acknowledging her meant admitting their own positions were illegitimate. Civil war was not just possible, it was probable. And in the center of it all was the woman he had rejected, the mate bond he had severed, now revealed to be everything he had been told she was not. Powerful, noble, worthy, and absolutely, devastatingly beyond his reach because of choices he could never take back. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? I need time, Adrian said finally, his voice rough. This is not a decision I can make in a single moment. If what you claim is true, it changes everything. Isolde nodded slowly, as if she had expected this. You have until the next full moon, 1 month. During that time, I will undergo the traditional trials to prove my lineage and my worthiness to rule, as prescribed in the ancient texts. Any alpha who wishes to challenge my claim may do so in those trials. If I succeed, if I prove beyond doubt that I am who I say I am, then you will acknowledge my sovereignty and step aside. Or, her smile was dangerous, you will fight me for the throne, and we will let the moon goddess decide who deserves to rule her children. Either way, the age of pretending the moon-blessed never existed is over. Either way, Adrian, you are going to have to choose. And this time, make sure you can live with the consequences, because I promise you, there will not be a third chance. She turned then, her robes swirling dramatically, and began walking back toward the entrance, Marin following silently beside her. The crowd parted automatically, wolves pressing themselves against the walls to avoid getting too close to her crackling power. But before she reached the doors, she paused and looked back over her shoulder one more time. Oh, and Adrian? In case you were wondering, I can still feel the mate bond, that thin, damaged thread that connects us despite your rejection. I feel you searching for me at night. Feel your wolf calling to mine. It hurts, does it not? Being incomplete. Being severed from the one person fate chose specifically for you. Good. Now you know how it felt when you chose her. She gestured dismissively at Seraphine. Over me. Sleep well, Alpha King. You have 30 days to decide if you want to be remembered as the ruler who embraced change and justice, or the one who fought to maintain a system built on murder and betrayal. Choose wisely. Then she was gone, leaving behind chaos and confusion, and an Alpha King who finally, too late, understood exactly what he had lost. And somewhere in the distance, the moon shone brighter than it had in generations, as if the goddess herself was smiling at the return of her chosen bloodline.